Hi Year 8, welcome to your third video about geology. So a bit of feedback from my last video that I made. Apparently I was talking really slowly. So I'm going to try and speed it up in this video, but of course I still want you to be understanding what I'm actually saying. So I hope you like our little meme that we're starting off this video with. I hope you're in just as good a mood as this little rock is here. He's such a happy little guy. Now, let's get into it. So in our last video, we looked at the rock cycle and we learned about how the different types of rocks, our three different types of rocks, were actually formed. So before we learn anything new, I want to have a bit of a review of that. So here is a little diagram showing our rock cycle. However, the actual types of rocks have been left off it. So your task is to fill these in. So if you're watching on YouTube, you need to pause this and write it in your workbook. If you're watching it on Zaption, questions about to pop up for you. So you need to look very carefully at the processes on these arrows to figure out what sort of rock each of these represent. Good luck. In this video, we're moving on to another learning objective. So it's explain the difference between sedimentary, metamorphic and igneous rocks. Now remembering these learning objectives should be the basis for your study notes. If you're writing notes as we go through the topic, which is a fabulous idea, I'll be putting this at the top of the page and putting your dot points, tables, diagrams, pictures, anything underneath to answer the learning objective. So let's start having a closer look at sedimentary rocks. There are many different types of sedimentary rocks, and some of them you may have heard of before, such as limestone or sandstone. Even rock salt is a type of sedimentary rock, and we'll learn about what makes all of these types of sedimentary rocks different. As the definition of a sedimentary rock is any rock that is formed by the compaction and cementation of small grains of sediment. But that definition isn't that useful to us if we don't understand this word. So what actually is a sediment? Well, sediments are just fragments of rocks that have been broken down as a result of weathering and erosion. So you can think of sediments as being little bits of rock. These little bits of rock are sometimes called sand or pebbles or even silt. You've already learned about the processes of weathering and erosion in geography class. Just how you can see that all our subjects actually link together. But if you need a refresher, here's a little Venn diagram that shows us what both of them are. So they are different processes. So weathering is actually the breaking down of the rocks into the smaller parts. So if we think about a rocky cliff in the ocean, or on the ocean, sorry, if the waves are smashing against that rocky cliff, over time, smaller bits or sediments of that rock are going to be broken off, and that would be weathering. Erosion, however, is the movement of this sediment from one place to another. So same, if we think about that same rocky cliff, weathering has caused the sediments to be broken off, and erosion, that's the waves still smashing against the cliff, is going to move those sediments away. It's going to move them to a new location. So although weathering and erosion are actually different processes, they can still both occur due to the same factors. So they can both occur due to water, gravity, ice, or wind. So that's how sediments are formed. Now these sediments are actually classified, if I can make this bigger, they're classified according to their size. Looking at this diagram, you can clearly see that clay is the smallest type of sediment, whereas a boulder, which you can think of as being a really big rock, is actually still a type of sediment. It's just the biggest type. Sand that you see around your beaches is also just a type of sediment, and these are all just classified according to how big they are. It's got nothing to do with what they're actually made up of. Now that we know about what sediments are, we need to look at how these sediments combine to make a sedimentary rock. So the eroded sediments end up in the water and they begin to settle there. With time, more and more of these layers start to build up. This has the effect of adding pressure to the lower layers. This pressure causes them to be pressed together or compacted. The final step is the process of cementation. Now, this is when the sediments start to get glued together. And this actually happens because salt crystals start to form, and these act as the glue that bring the sediments together. Once all these processes have occurred, the layers of sediment have been turned into a sedimentary rock. So there's the steps for you. Here's a cool little picture for us to look at. And yes, you are correct. This is from Insty. And I've left the Instagram account up here because I know you guys are always looking for some cool educational Instagram accounts to follow. So this is a nice one for you. And for anyone that's wondering, no, this is not my Instagram account. That will remain a secret. But what this picture is of is a rock that is 350 million years old. That's pretty old. It's older than me, that's for sure. Probably older than your parents. Definitely older than your parents, I should say. But it's not the whole rock that's 350 million years old. It's only some of it. So we know that when a sedimentary rock is formed, it's formed in layers. And this is as the sediments deposit. They deposit in layers. And what we call those layers are strata. Stratification is what we call the process of a rock that has been formed in layers. So back to our picture. In this picture, not all of this rock is the same age. The bottom strata or the bottom layers are going to be older. And that's because the sediments in those layers were deposited first. So they've been sitting there for the longest. The layers on the top, or the strata on the top, they haven't been there for quite as long. Those sediments would have only been deposited fairly recently. And by recently, still probably thousands and thousands of years ago. So if we're looking at this photograph, it's only these layers or the strata down the bottom that would be 350 million years old. And near the top, they would be a bit younger. It would have been made more recently, maybe 100 million years ago. We take a look at this little diagram here, that just shows us the same thing. So you can see our layers of, or our strata of rock, all the different ones. And then our time scale here tells us that as we go down the layers, the rocks get older. So these strata, or layers, that are right down the bottom here, are 1 billion years old. Whereas the ones sitting up the top here, so this strata, probably only about 200 million years old. So that's how you can start to think about the age of layers of rock.